Senator Williams, will you lead us in a prayer?
Be glad to. Thank you. Let us bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you again for another beautiful day. Thank you for our many blessings and opportunities. Thank you for the ability to be here and to represent the people of the great state of Georgia, dear God. Please bless our first responders, our police, our fire, and the men and women in harm's way and our armed forces. In thy name we pray, amen.
Amen. All right, so the first bill we have on the agenda, HB 244.
This one good, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee. Mr. Chairman, thanks for the chance to present House Bill 244, LC 473465S. This bill provides some flexibility in the state's annual audit requirements for small local governments whose expenditures are less than a $2.5 million threshold. By allowing this flexibility, it will set conditions for these smaller locales to accept critical state funding. As you might know, currently all local governments are subject to their financial statements being prepared and audited on fully generally accepted accounting principles or a GAAP basis. And I tell you from experience, these smaller cities and counties in some instances, really with a population of 1,000 or less, just don't have the staff, the experience, or the available funding, or the access to the independent auditing firms that perform these types of audits on local governments. For the past several weeks, and this also came out of a 2023 recommendation from the Rural Development Council, that we asked the Department of Audits and Accounts to come up with a system that was less cumbersome, but also had some more flexible, but also had some responsible requirements in there for smaller local governments. But we've worked with Ledge Counsel, Mr. Greg Griffin, State Auditor's Office, to come up with some less complex, less expensive, but also taxpayer accountable auditing requirements for our small local governments that are below a certain threshold. And the goal of the legislation here was to achieve some balance between the cost of compliance while retaining accountability for the taxpayers who live there. And I think we've done that with the language in this bill. So again, it was kind of a key initiative of RDC back in 2023 to kind of reduce the accounting and audit burden by 2025. So we're trying to meet that timeline from the RDC. Mr. Chairman, that's kind of a brief summary of the bill. With your permission, I'd like to ask the state auditor to go over some technical parts of the language, if you can. Brief summary of that so you kind of get the feel from what the auditor is talking about.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Cannon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. So we are trying to reduce the burden for the accounting and auditing for the small cities, and in doing that at a summary level, we currently have a threshold of $550,000. Anything above that requires a full audit. And in this bill, we are raising that limit to $2.5 million. So we're going to make it easier for all those cities and counties underneath, primarily cities, underneath the $2.5 million. We're also in the bill introducing an additional option, what's called a special purpose framework, where if they want an audit, they can get an audit we're going to specify on a cash basis with less requirements than a full audit under generally accepted accounting principles. So there are two things going on here. We're raising the limits for a full audit, and we're providing an additional flexibility, what's called a special purpose framework, again, a cash basis audit for smaller entities. I can go through specific line items in the bill where those changes are being made if you like.
Thank you. Any comments, questions from the committee? Mr. Whip?
Yeah, Representative Cannon, I appreciate you carrying this bill. I've never heard anybody say that Greg would come up and give a less complex answer or information. Greg's a pretty complex guy. Real quick to the auditor, what do we do in county audits right now?
the county audits are under the same provisions today. So anything over $550,000, and there's also a population threshold, but anything over 550, a full audit is required.
Does this bring will the counties move into line with the municipalities?
The thresholds that are in this bill will only affect the smaller cities. So the county, we'd have to put in separate thresholds to bring in some of the smaller counties. Most of the counties are compliant. They generally, eventually become compliant. They might be late annually, but generally they will ultimately become compliant. The smaller cities that we have over 100 cities that are out of compliance today. Many of those cities are out of compliance multiple years. Many of them are out of compliance 5 years. So this bill is really addressing those. It's going to target those smaller entities, cities.
And is this going to, by raising the 550 up to 2.5, is this going to increase the number of cities that will be required to do this?
It will increase the number of cities that have the option of using a lesser burdensome mechanism or framework. Again, today, anybody under 550 can get what's called an agreed upon procedures.
Mm-hmm.
We're raising that 550 up to 2.5 million. So we're going to bring in about 50% of the population of cities that can have the ability to do an audit or an AUP.
A much easier way to
Absolutely.
do that. Okay.
Easier, less costly, less burdensome.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Greg.
One more comment, Chairman. Just as an example, in our county is 50,000 people, and our audit cost us about $75,000 a year for a county of 50,000 people or less. When we solicit bids for those auditing firms once every 3 years, we might get 2 folks to respond to it, and that's for now $80,000, $70,000 audit. I can imagine the difficulty for a city of 100 and 150 people. I've talked to cities that are not in that range. They just can't find the people who want to do the audits. They don't have the staff or the funds to do something like that. I mean, a single audit on a CDBG award is $7,500. In some cases, that could be a third of the general fund of a small city. So it is really an issue. And the biggest thing here is the CDBG allocations and also the LMIG allocations. So these cities that really need some help are just not able to get any state funds that come down through the feds. And as a result, their population is suffering. So that's the biggest issue I see with it.
So those smaller cities, they're not getting any help from the state or federal level. That $75,000 every other year is coming straight out of their already pretty small budget. Okay, and then raising it to 2.5 would cover about 50% of the cities in the state. Is that about? Is that what you?
That's correct.
Okay.
If you're ineligible, if you haven't turned in an audit, you're ineligible to receive state funding or LMIG and those types of funds, which, again, those citizens are missing out on those opportunities and services.
Okay, thank you. Senator Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a reason that we make them report 5 years, or is that just the way it's always been, or is there a reason we have to have 5-year reporting, or could it be a shorter time limit? I've got a lot of these cities that are in this situation, and they just don't have staff and resources, and people move and change and leave, and things just get left.
The 5-year requirement has been there forever. I don't know what the basis is. Again, there's some sort of accountability with that. Does it have to be 5?
Okay.
Could be shorter.
I may have missed it. How many will this clean up?
So by raising the limit to $2.5 million, we will make 50% of the cities eligible for something other than a full gap audit.
Okay.
Now, if they want to, they could have some of them might still need a full gap audit. They might have bonds or they might have a grant that specifies, I need an audit under gap. But if there's no requirements, they would then be able to have the ability to use the cash basis audit or the AUP approach.
Okay, good deal. Thank you, appreciate the bill.
Senator Sessler.
Thank you. To the author, like the bill, appreciate you doing this. I did have a question relating to something that came up just a second ago. Imagine the city qualifies for a grant or something, whether it's, I know LMIG's very small, that's going to tend to be more pro forma every year, but say there's an overpass or something like that that's taken by the city, and that spikes, and maybe it's a $5 million project that's done 1 year. Does the definition, is that covered? I mean, is there a?
It is. So there's a provision in here that allows the state auditor to provide a waiver, if you will, for an entity that might have a one-time scenario that might make them move from a cash basis or an AUP approach to a full gap audit. We don't want, we're trying to avoid people jumping from one to the other and come back. That's costly to go from an AUP or a cash basis audit to a full audit. So we've got some language in there that allows me to grant a waiver based on facts and circumstances.
Yeah, because the language around, I'm just kind of talking out loud here. I mean, or thinking out loud here. I mean, the language around having expenditures of $1 million or less, not super precise, not average annualized expenditures of the last 5. There's nothing like
Correct.
that. It's just
Those federal grants, capital projects, those types of things you're going to see this. Today, I don't have that ability to make that call. It's black or white. If you're over or under, if you're over the 550, you get an audit. In the bill and the language we proposed here, it gives me the ability to make a waiver based on facts and circumstances.
Thank you.
Senator Estevez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the bill, agree with the intent, and know how expensive these audits can be. I'm curious if you have any data on how effective these audits are at, in addition to the accuracy perspective of it, but catching fraud and significant mistakes. Is there any data on that?
So the AUP is going to be less, is going to catch less fraud than an audit. Now, the audits are not designed
You gotta tell me what an AUP is.
Okay, I'll get, yeah. So AUP, so it's agreed upon procedures. So that is an engagement where the auditor is, has a list of procedures that they're following, and basically they have to have a yes/no answer to that. So that it doesn't necessarily require a review of internal controls. No audit actually looked for fraud, but you have a better chance of detecting it if you're doing an audit. What this proposes is a option to have a cash basis audit instead of an AUP or a full audit. And so under the cash basis audit, you would still have, that would be a much stronger detection for fraud or bad actors than an agreed upon procedures engagement.
So we're not necessarily eliminating an option or a tool that can be used to identify fraud or significant errors.
We're not.
Because
We're not eliminating a tool.
Yeah.
No. And go ahead. Yeah, that's right. Yep. So also in here, we're with the AUP language, agreed upon procedures, since they're less structured, we are adding a requirement that they actually have a full audit every 5 years to provide for that accountability. And under that approach, they can, again, if they meet the certain thresholds, they could get a cash-based audit as opposed to a full gap audit. This one's the most expensive. A cash basis audit is going to be much less burdensome to prepare.
And that seems to be consistent with what happens in the private sector with
Yes.
nonprofits. And
So you can do that again, we're following the private sector. Again, in the private sector, the accounting standards, the FASB has rules for big companies and medium-sized and small companies. The special purpose framework that we are proposing here is little gap for governments. Again, the GASB does not have, it's one size fits all. This allows us to have a different size approach for smaller entities.
Any further comments, questions? We've got one person signed up to speak, Dante Handel.
Surrounded.
Good morning, Chairman Dixon, members of the committee. Dante Handel with ACCG. Want to express our full support for the bill. Very grateful to Representative Cannon for bringing it and to Mr. Griffin for all his work on it. Does help counties with a hold harmless provision in the instances where a constitutional officer is not complying with those audit requirements, and that, as was discussed, can affect our eligibility for state grants, such as LMIG dollars or those LRA dollars that fix up the roads. So it is definitely very large help to those counties that are in those circumstances, although they are infrequent. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, Mr. Handel? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, we've got, no. Oh, thank you. That would be now. Senator again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you consider this a department bill?
I would not. This is what? No, this is not a department bill.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to pass.
We've got a motion to pass. We've got a second. Any comments or questions? Committee seeing none. All in favor, raise your hand. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the committee.
Moving on to HB 521. Oh, Representative Cannon, what senator do you have carrying the bill?
I think Senator Watson.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Cannon and I did receive a memo that said the tan plaid jacket was the appropriate House member attire for this committee today, so
I was going to ask if y'all were coordinating.
they're similar, not the same, but similar. Thank you, sir. Today I bring before you House Bill 521. There are three components to this bill. The first component simply requires that shape files for de-annexed properties be provided to the Legislative and Congressional Reapportionment Office here in the state legislature. We did this a couple of years ago for annexation matters and did not cover de-annexed properties. So this is something that that office had requested that we add into this bill if possible. So that, the bulk of the volume of the bill is Section 1, but that touches in several different areas that we require that. Section 2 applies to basically one county in the state because of the descriptor on it, and it would require annexed property to be agreed upon by both the municipality and the county. It would apply only to Paulding County because of the descriptor, and that being that any county or any county in which an airport is owned or operated either by such county or a local authority, and such airport is adjacent to 9,000 acres of or more of property currently or formerly owned by a municipality, but has no incorporated territory within such county. So this is a specific bill that attaches to a specific area designed to address some concerns that are going on there that we've included in this provision. Section 3 is something that was overlooked in a de-annexation bill that we had a couple of years ago, and this actually puts a time frame on a specific type of de-annexation. If a county owns 100% of a piece of property that they wish to de-annex out of a city, this is only county-owned property that is located within a municipality that they wish to de-annex so that they can have better control over building standards and time frames and that sort of thing, that the municipality must respond to this de-annexation request within 90 days. And that's, be open to any questions, sir.
Thank you. Senator Gann?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you mention a county-owned piece of property
Yes, sir.
and a building standard, so if I'm in the city of Atlanta and Fulton County has a piece of property, the zoning regulations don't apply to local governments, whether you're a school system or whether you're city or county or whatever. So I'm trying to think, when you think about building requirements, tell me what we're talking about building.
I'll tell you what I'd like to do, if I may, Mr. Chairman, if I could exercise phone a friend, I'd like to ask someone in the audience here, if I could,
Absolutely.
help me assist in answering this question for this specific situation that we discussed.
So the specific situation we're talking about, we represent, I'm Don Boley, I represent Henry County. And in Henry County, they owned a number of parcels that are in the city of McDonough, and for the including some admin buildings and whatnot. And so
Courthouse
their
and
desire, oh, what's that?
The courthouse.
Yes, yes. And so their desire is to de-annex those buildings. They've gone through the process. Because there's not an end date, there simply is there's no recourse. The city doesn't respond. DCA can't interact because there is no end date, and the city hasn't responded because there's no 90-day end date.
What's the building that we're talking about? You know, and that's what was brought up in the bill was the.
There are a number of parcels, and specifically what they want to do is they're looking to build, like for instance, there is a group that wants to build tiny homes for veterans, and so they want to have control over that permitting process while they're doing that.
Okay, so you're actually talking about going into a city and de-annexing the property that the county owns, but then the county's going to turn around and sell that to
No. The county would continue to own the property, and they're just simply going to be leasing it to a developer that wants to build some tiny homes. In addition to that, they're also going to do, in addition to the admin center and the government center, so there's other things they want to do within the confines of these 10 parcels.
Mr. Boley, I said, I know that if you take a burr and you put it up under the saddle, you get a real blister. Said, is this not just going to create a problem? I can understand for county purposes, okay,
Yeah.
the county wants to go do something and they're going to, they're doing it with their courthouse or whatever. They got their rules and regulations. But when you go out here to build tiny homes in a city's got our zoning around it is we have single family residences with, acre lot minimums. And now I'm going to go stick the county says, we're going to put tiny homes on here and we're going to do,
Well, I would
1/12
also
of an
submit to
acre.
you that you have to have service delivery issues. The city can't protest under any service delivery issues. So there are issues that the city can protest those things. I'd also submit that the original bill that you all passed last year on de-annexation always contemplated allowing this. They just never put in a timetable for when the city would have to respond. So all this really does is put a timetable on a bill you already passed last year. So what happens is that this process that you intended to allow to occur happens, but since the cities don't have an end date, there's no timetable, they simply just can sit on it. DCA says their hands are tied because the city must respond before DCA can interact in the process and continue the de-annexing process. So I would submit to you, you've already, as the General Assembly last year, intended to have this happen. The only thing that you didn't do was put a 90-day end date, which normally happens in this process. It was just, I think, something that was overlooked, and this just remedies that.
thank you.
Senator Watson, did you have a question? Senator Estevez?
Yep, thank you. Question about the specific provision that appears to be related to a specific airport. Just curious what the reasoning behind that language is. What's the rationale?
As far as the language relating to the airport and the property, the proximity to the property, that basically designates one particular area, one particular county, okay? And the provision that we are asking for in this particular county is that annexations have mutual consent from both parties, the municipality and the county, on annexations in that county that fits that descriptor. So it's not directly tied to the airport.
Okay. And was this language in the House version of this bill
Yes.
that passed?
It was in the House version.
Okay.
The author, the sponsor of that bill is here if there's specific questions related to that particular bill. This was something that we added to this bill between chambers.
So it was added now.
It did pass in the House, but it was under a separate House bill number. We did include it as an amendment or in the substitute for this bill. Right.
Okay. So this is not new language
That is correct.
in this committee.
That is correct, yes.
Got it.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions?
Thank you. Is this specific to one county, or is it statewide?
The bill would apply statewide.
Okay.
Now, the description or the requirements in section 2 would make it only apply in one county. That'd be Paulding County.
Okay. Reason I wonder, because we have state property in Milledgeville, Baldwin County, and it was annexed into the city some years ago by the mayor when we had residents in that institution for census purposes. Now all of that is shut down and all of those properties are still in the city. What steps would we go through to get that de-annexed from the city back just to the county?
Well,
Would this bill cover that?
this bill would not necessarily cover that because the county does not own that property. The
The
state owns
state
that
does, so
property.
the
Yes.
state would de-annex it from the city?
I would defer that question to legislative council. I would assume that would require legislative action to happen, so possibly a legislative de-annexation.
That's one way, or the state could apply for a de-annexation like any other property owner could.
Yeah, the reason I ask, because some of the city building codes are very strict and zoning requirements, and the county is easier to get things done and to build, remodel, that kind of thing. So looking at ways that might could be handled, I've been asked to look into that. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, you may have, Mr. the other bill, you may have already answered this, but that last.
If you would pull your mic down, thank you very much.
Sorry. The last section, dealing with the 90 days of filing of the de-annexation application, the notice to the, would be within that actual application. How would that work, and why is it that you're putting that 90 days? You're saying it was contemplated before, but it was not in there. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Currently, there is no deadline. Okay, the application can be filed and action on the part of the municipality. There is no deadline in state code to require or compel them to act upon the application. And all we're doing is placing a time limit, in essence, a 3-month, 90-day time limit for answer to the application.
What would be the reasonings, why do they not act on the application other than just dilatory? I mean, what are the motivations for not acting on it? If they really just don't want the action that is contemplated, that's what's really going on?
Well, and thank you for that question. It's a very good question. The standpoint that I present this bill based on is looking at the policy issue at hand here. There are specific issues that brought this to our attention, and irregardless of the specific issues in that particular case, which is going to occur if this were to happen in any community, having a defined time frame from a policy standpoint is the reason I'm bringing this bill. So I can't really speak to the impetus for not responding in the particular situation with Henry County.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Yeah, would like to hear from GMA and ACCG. Just, I know y'all not signed up to speak on this, but would love to, if y'all have got an opinion on it, if you're neutral.
Good morning, everyone. DJ Waller with Georgia Municipal Association. We represent all 537 cities in Georgia. Currently, we are neutral on the bill. We understand the 90-day period. We still allow city to object if they want to, if they find that the annexation may be detrimental to the municipality. So we are neutral because that is in there. And I'll turn it over to Todd for.
We do support the bill. We'd worked closely with Representative Anderson a few years ago on the de-annexation law. I think it was asked earlier what the impetus was. What we're finding is it's a step process if you want to de-annex, whether you're a government-owned property or not. From a city, you can do it. There's always local legislation by which the state can do that, or General Assembly. The city can also do it voluntarily. This was a third option that would allow someone to petition to de-annex, similar to annexation laws, but with a lot more safeguards. The impetus behind this bill, as I understand it from both the county and the author, was that it's a step process where the property owner would go to the county must first grant permission, and then the property owner goes to the city, and the city must act on whether or not. It says the city must approve, but that's not true because they can deny it. I believe the language, I don't have the bill in front of me, is due to the public, if it has a negative impact on the public health, safety, or welfare. What we've encountered in this case and in others is that once it goes to the city to act, it sits indefinitely. As to why, I can't answer for cities, obviously, but it basically just stalls the whole process. In this case, it was a county trying to petition. This bill is limited to a county-owned property petitioning to get their parcels out and maybe do the building codes or the permitting process. I don't know, but I just wanted to add that. We do support the legislation, and it is very limited in scope on that aspect. We don't have a position on the other aspect, dealing with a particular county, the airport, et cetera. I mean, if we were going to get into that, changing annexation law, we'd work closely with GMA in that process.
And then if the city objects, is there just certain criteria they can object on as far as stopping the de-annexation?
Yeah, if it finds that the de-annexation would be, and this is lines 135 to 137, would be if they can object if it's detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the residents and property owners of the area to be de-annexed, so to the area to be de-annexed, or to the remaining area of the city.
As long as 132 through 137.
Remember that.
Mr. Chairman, in light of they're singing the same verse,
Yep.
I move do pass on the bill.
Okay, we got a motion do pass. We've got a second. To the author of the bill, I neglected to ask you the LC number you're working off of.
Yes, sir. I do apologize. I should have brought that. It's LC 473531S.
Okay. So we've got a motion do pass. We've got a second. Any discussion from the committee? Senator Estevez?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say, Mr. Chairman, to the author of the bill, I will be voting no just to get more information on that specific provision, just to make sure.
Understand.
No
Yes,
other
sir.
qualms.
Yes, sir.
But
Thank you.
just need to know that's very specific.
Thank you.
So just want to know what the beef is there. The senator from the 29th, you got to watch him. So.
Any further comments, questions from the committee? We've got a motion do pass. We've got a second. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Almost passes unanimous.
Thank you, sir.
Who do you have carrying the bill?
I believe the chairman had agreed to carry
I
this
have.
forward.
Yes, you're correct.
Yes, sir. We'll get together on that. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
committee.
Well, you know it must if I'm carrying the bill, right?
That motion
All right, so we've got our last bill on the agenda, HB 646.
Well, good morning. I think it's still morning.
Yes, ma'am, it is. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for allowing me to present House Bill 646, LC 560366S. And if you don't mind, I would love to have my partner in crime here.
Absolutely.
Representative Will Wade assist me as we present again House Bill 646 relating to corners, which is a very important line of work here in the state of Georgia. Every county has a corner, and they part of the first responders, and they provide a great service to our communities. And this bill will really is relating to corners as to provide minimum salaries for corners and to revise compensation revisions for deputy corners. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's again just to help our corners across the state of Georgia. And you know, I can pause and take some questions if anyone have any, but this is really to help our corners across the state. And if Representative Wade would like to join in and share anything else.
Yeah, I'm happy to. The biggest thing is that we carried this this is the third year. We've passed it out of the House now 3 times. Mm-hmm. And it just updates the code. The minimum salary schedule has not been addressed in over now 34 years.
That's right.
And we also acknowledge that deputy coroners are valued. We in the Constitution have a requirement that every county have at least 1 deputy coroner, and this acknowledges the 21st century demands on the ability for some deputy coroners to have co-vocation is not quite as easy. And so if you're on call all day 24/7, I can give you an example. There is a deputy coroner that did not get to come to their son's baseball game last night, plays with my son, because he's on call, and it was an away game, and he could not be out of town because he had to be on call. Ironically, he ended up getting a call about 9:30 that night. So in the way this bill contemplates, he would not be paid a per diem for being on call. He would be able to get that case fee, and that gives the county commission and the coroner's office the ability to negotiate that through their budget process. So it doesn't negate the county's final say on that budget. It just puts in statute that we want to acknowledge that deputy coroners have value, and their time is just as valuable as a fireman or an EMT that's on call as well. So really enjoyed this has been a bipartisan effort in the House.
Yes.
You know, I don't look at coroners as a Republican or Democrat issue. They serve folks typically when they're having a really tough time, and the job that is associated with that. They're dealing with families that are dealing with tragedy, and it is just a valuable part of the ecosystem in our state, and I think it's time for us to address it. And I just appreciate Patty leading this effort this year.
And being in the funeral industry, if I may say, Mr. Chairman, Rick Williams and I are in that industry, and we work well with our coroners, and we know and understand the work and the important work that they're doing. And we, as Chairman Wade stated, bill has been vetted and back and forth for a couple of years now. So we're really trying to pass along, if all possible, to help our coroners across the state of Georgia.
And as far as the salaries, this would be pushed, that would be the county that would be paying this, is that correct? Not the state? Is that
is correct. This is
right.
There's no fiscal note. This is just the county. And we have worked with ACCG. The actual salary schedule was agreed upon last year, and so there's no, they're not against that. I think they've got some nuanced things that they'd like to potentially ask for, and I'm sure that, you know, Representative Stinson and I are happy to listen to. We would have liked to have heard what those were prior to today. My understanding is that information was provided on Monday, and no one from ACCG has reached out to me. I don't know that they reached out to you.
No, I haven't heard from anyone from ACCG.
To offer some additional feedback, but we understand and respect the committee's process to go through that. We appreciate ACCG's role, but I don't know specifically what nuance changes that they'd like to consider, but we're happy to listen to those.
Mr. Whip.
Thank you. To my good friend from Butler, how are you? It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well, my friend.
Coroners are not constitutional officers, correct?
That is understandable, but they're elected just like you and I.
Right.
Well, but they are not on the equal plane as a constitutional officers. Would that be correct? State that. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay. So do we have a schedule for any other non-constitutional elected position that we have passed here through the legislature beyond minimum salaries?
Not that I'm aware of. Coroners will be the only one.
Okay, and we have 159 counties now. Does each county have a coroner?
Yes, they should.
155.
They have the option, right? The county or the city or the county government has the option of either having a coroner or hiring a medical examiner. Would that not be true?
Yes, they
Yes.
could have the choice to hire the more expensive model, which is a medical examiner.
And you know, you're exactly right. Medical examiners are costlier, but the qualifications of a medical examiner and the qualifications of a coroner are different also, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And what I'm just trying to drill down on is if we're doing everything the same way throughout the state, and the salaries of coroners and deputy coroners are currently the responsibility of the county as far as budget negotiations and things of that nature, correct?
Yes.
Do we currently allow deputy coroners and coroners to work for funeral homes? I believe I know the answer. It's rhetorical because I believe I do have one county that the actual coroner does work at one, I believe.
So I don't think anybody from the coroner association's here, but through the last 3 years, what I've learned is the number of coroners and deputy coroners that work for funeral homes statewide has been declining each and every year for many years due to many different factors outside of this specific issue. Yeah. But in certain cases that still exists. There are also coroners that have remained coroner into their 70s, and even I've been told one in their 80s, because they cannot find someone that is willing to run for coroner in smaller counties because of what the current statute does have salaries in the code. So to that question you had earlier is, do we have a statute where they are paid? We do have for certain ones. We're just modifying it and expanding it based on Georgia's population.
Is that current statute, does it just establish a minimum salary?
It is just a minimum.
It's just a
that's
minimum.
all this is doing, is just
Right.
changing the minimum.
Okay,
Changing the minimum. Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you for providing me a copy of the two amendments that, I guess, this is ACCG's request, or is this the member's request?
It was shared as something that might be peaceful language that
Okay.
everyone could agree to. I'll let them speak for themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Senator again.
Chairman, what I'm looking at is proposed amendment HB 646 LCC 560366S, and this has 18 lines on it. So the first one is dealing with lines 31 through 36, and I think one of the things that in there that does trouble me a little bit, and I don't know if you can elaborate on it, but it talks about a deputy coroner getting paid for a certain number of days of per diem for not doing anything. I mean, whether they do anything or not, they get paid. And so for me, the proposal would be, okay, if a deputy coroner takes action and does something, they're responding for the coroner, they get paid the same $250 rate that the coroner would. And that makes sense, because otherwise we're just saying, okay, well, because you've been named a deputy coroner, you're going to get paid for $100 for X number of days. That, I don't know if it's hard for me that it's taxpayer money, and I think unless you can expound on it, why that should happen.
So let me give you the history as to where we landed on that. And the subject is, it's still subject to the county's approval. So the coroner would have to ask and justify, hey, I need, in my community, they may say, hey, I've got a deputy coroner that I need to cover, 67 days in this calendar year, because I know I'm going to be taking these days off. They're 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Those people will put aside, just like a fireman and just like an EMT, a situation where they are on call and have to drop of a hat, go climb up Amicalola Falls in my district, go into Lake Lanier and pull a body out. They are ready and prepared to do that work and that effort. In today's work environment, some employers are not as flexible to say, hey, if you're going to be working for me and you happen to be a deputy coroner, you have to work for me today and you can't be on call. So it's trying to bring a balance to acknowledge that, and again, a county would still have the local flexibility to determine if they felt like paying $100 to have somebody set aside 24 hours. In my math brain, it's a pretty good deal to have somebody set aside an entire day to be on call for $100 minimum, and they would lose that opportunity. They would not receive a on-call pay if they actually received a call. So then that language would be fine. Additionally, some counties have already made a decision and pay their deputy coroners minimum salaries. So I don't have any problem with these two amendments because I think it gets at the heart of what we're trying to acknowledge is it's hard to recruit deputy coroners right now. If local communities want to do something above and beyond that, that's the amendment.
We looking at the same amendment. I've got 18 lines.
That's it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
these are amenable.
and so they're amendments y'all can live with?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, at the proper time, I'd make a motion.
We're not there yet. I've not even seen the amendments.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, we've got some other questions going here. Senator Mallow?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my good colleagues, Representative Stinson, Representative Wade, I appreciate the explanation for that. So, for instance, if a deputy coroner was to be on call and let's say the coroner had to have a medical procedure, had surgery, and was out, then they couldn't perform the duties, but the deputy coroner would be the person that would be on call and have to respond to all those calls because we do have a coroner in Chatham County. So if the coroner was in the hospital because they had knee surgery, someone still has to respond, and that would be the deputy coroner, and he would have to be on call 24 hours because the coroner was not able to perform the duties at that time.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, that makes sense.
And just for clarity, they can't take both. Can't get on call time and a call fee. So
That's right.
if they don't get a call, they only get call time, which is capped at $100 a day. And if they get a call, then obviously it's the per case. Yeah. Can't. That's right.
That's right.
Just can't double dip.
Senator Watson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, and I may have missed this, but where this salary schedule that's on here, where did that come from? And how did y'all come up with this salary schedule? I've got a lot of counties that are under 50,000, and it's going to be a pretty big increase.
So this was through the last 3 years of process. So originally in code, it looks like it was 34 years ago. The legislature at that time determined that it made sense to have populations of under 35,000 have a minimum. And now we're just acknowledging that the landscape in Georgia has changed. And so through discussions with other legislators, other House members, ACCG, et cetera, this was a back and forth negotiation, and this is the numbers that people came up comfortable with. And again, it's not been in statute, so most of the 80% of the coroners across this state have not been receiving pay raises. The ones that may have received a pay raise through some of the state's COLA increases are only going to be on that under 35,000, and it would be based on if they're still sitting at that minimum salary of 1,200 to 3,000. I had one testify to us that I think they're around 20,000, and they did receive a COLA increase based on their base, which in their local community was at $7,000. So they got bumped to 12,000, just to give you an example of where they were from what was already in statute. But yeah, these numbers were negotiated through a process between ACCG, the Coroner Association, and other House colleagues over the last couple of years. And that was what was agreed upon, I think, actually, technically, now 3 years ago.
Okay. One more, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, absolutely.
On lines 35 and 36, where it says that, sufficient funds have been budgeted by a governing authority of the county. So what happens if the county says we don't have the money? sorry, are they gonna quit? Are they gonna keep doing their job? Or what kind of position are we putting these small rural counties in?
I think
by putting this in the code, and then
Yeah.
they don't have the resources to pay it. So then, what's
So-
that scenario? How's that play out?
So that exists today. It may or may not be written in code, but that dynamic exists. It happened during the Great Recession, in which they may have been wanting to add 2 additional deputy coroners, and the county said we can't budget it, and the coroner had to figure out a way to manage their office. Quite frankly, I can tell you in that time, coroners were working longer, and they were just, like my local coroner ended up handling probably, instead of 75% of cases during the Great Recession, he handled probably 95% of cases. And then they have to make a decision, do they want to run for office again and keep doing that work or not? And that dynamic doesn't change. The point to acknowledge it is that the county still has that final say. If they've got a specific to that one jurisdiction, they don't have the ability to justify the coroner's ask. This says that they still have the budget oversight to approve or to deny that request from a local coroner, so that every community can manage their budgets the way that they see fit. Very good question.
And just to add to that, Mr. Senator, as you stated, during the peak of COVID, the coroners were really super busy during that time, and the local governments had to adjust and work with them. And so, again, this doesn't take anything away from the local governments. It's just to really help our coroners.
Right. Well, and I mean, I'm sympathetic to all this, and I mean, I get what they're up against and how difficult their job is. But I miss lots and lots of ball games and things of just being here and when I'm at home. So I mean, but I knew that when I put my name on the line and I signed up for this job, and that was the decision I made. And I kind of feel like some of this is they're in that same boat, you know. But I'll be glad. I want to look at these amendments.
Thank you.
Senator Sessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I come from a county with a medical examiner. It's a different structure, so I plead great ignorance here. What's the? I'm just going to basic questions. I mean, how many cases does a coroner respond to? I mean, when you think about the workload for a coroner, I mean, at what size county is a coroner become a full-time job? Where their primary responsibilities are doing the job? I mean, do you have a sense of that?
I would say that somewhere in the neighborhood of, if you're in a community that has over 10 to 15,000, that is now in today's society, especially if you look at 35 years ago in Georgia, the average age of Georgians, right, and the percentage of those folks that are over 65, that, quite frankly, the risk of death increases the older we get, right? So that also depends on, you may be in a community like Dawson County, we have 30,000 citizens, and you compare us to another county with 30,000, but the percentage of folks that are 65 and older in my county is greater than another community, just based on those things. So there's nuance there, but I think, to me, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15,000 is a full-time job. Now, just one follow-up to that, though. However, the duties of a coroner exist beyond that of just one death. Yeah. So there are more than 2,080 hours a year that a coroner is having to continually work current cases and past cases as it relates to deaths, as it relates to going to court to deal with the process of if there's a criminal investigation, if they're waiting on GBI lab. So right. There is work that is being done whether or not somebody has passed away that day.
Mr. Chair, I know nothing about really the structure, how I guess these coroners' salaries are set in local law. I just don't see how, if a 15,000 person community needs a full-time coroner, let's say you're a 25,000 person community, that you clearly need a full-time coroner. How does $30,000 a year support a full-time coroner?
I didn't say that I thought that the minimum salary schedule was enough to justify it, and I will also say there are many counties that have made a decision to pay. For example, Dawson County has 30,000 citizens. This legislation would not benefit my coroner. They already pay 3 times that amount for his services because of the volume of deaths that we have in our county compared to other similar-sized counties. It's just updating a minimum standard, quite frankly, to kind of consider inflation since 35 years ago.
Yes.
I would love to consider a higher number, but this number has been agreed upon through Coroner Association, ACCG, and quite frankly, many local county commissioners and coroners that weighed in over the last 3 years. So the gentleman's not wrong, but that's just the case. That's just the way it is.
Senator Williams.
Thank you. Is there anything to prohibit a coroner from having more than one deputy coroner?
There's nothing in here that would dictate that they can have more than one. So right now, the law currently requires a minimum of one. Nothing changes there.
Right.
In my home county, Baldwin County, our coroner's elected, and then he has 2, 3, 4, 5 deputy coroners. So if all of those deputy coroners don't get a call, but they claim their own call, do they get that per diem per day?
Only if the county commission in that county were to approve that budget request from the
Right.
coroner to justify the number of days up to that cap that they're asking for. Or if they have local legislation or they make their own minimum salary schedule locally, that nothing will prohibit local legislation.
Yeah.
It doesn't guarantee that they could do that, no, sir.
That's right.
Well, and there again, there it comes, because I run funeral home like Miss Patty there, and I have guys on call to make removals. And if they don't get a removal, they don't get paid. So, but they're on call. And I've got more than one on call. I've got about 4 or 5 guys that I can reach out to. And I'll do a group text. And 1, 2 of them will say, we'll make the call. Okay. So, you know, and it's kind of that way with our deputy coroners. But is there anything in the legislation that says, okay, I get elected coroner, how many cases must I work as being the elected coroner? And do I have to fill out a report? Or do I get elected coroner, then I don't work any cases, I just let my deputies work all the cases. So all of a sudden a deputy coroner is making $65,000 a year in a county, and the elected coroner is making $18,000, but a deputy is making $65,000 because the elected coroner doesn't work any cases.
Well, Mr. Williams, in lines 104 on page 5 of the bill, it referenced the number of hours that a coroner is required to work with at least 100 death investigations. So did that help answer your question, address your
No,
question?
because the hours don't count.
Okay.
Well, but there is 100
100
death
deaths.
investigations too.
Yeah. In the event the coroner or his or her immediate predecessor spent at least 2,080 hours on duties related to his or her role as the coroner and the coroner's office in such county administered at least 100 death investigations in the preceding calendar year, the county governing authority shall provide the coroner the same employment benefits it provides the clerk of Superior Court, judge of the probate court, sheriff, or tax commissioner. Now, what I'm saying is somebody gets elected coroner and they just choose not to answer the calls. They just choose to allow their deputies to answer the calls so they get paid.
Well, I think what you would deal with, if that would be a local situation, and
Right.
there's nothing that prevents the political process from constituents being informed of anybody that's in public office that maybe is not doing the job that the people would expect them to do. But nothing would require the county to pay those deputy coroners any funds unless the county were to approve that through their budget process.
Yeah.
So I don't know that many deputy coroners that are going to go and do a job without them being paid. And so I think the county would still have, again, budget oversight as it relates to that.
Yeah.
And I just think that, you know, if there's a coroner in this state, but that's the case and they're not doing their job, then that's a great reason we have local organs in the newspaper and people can write to the editor and share concerns about folks that are elected that aren't doing their job.
But unfortunately, nobody reads those newspapers much anymore.
They do in Dawson County.
Yeah. All right, you mentioned your coroner in Dawson County. Who is he?
That's Ted Bearden. He is a former president of the Coroner Association a few years ago.
Uh-huh.
And he is just a longtime constituent and friend.
Yeah, he's a great guy. How many deputies does he have?
He currently has been approved for, I believe, 5.
Uh-huh.
He has 3 that are paid, and our current county commission chairman is a former EMT. He's retired, but he volunteers and receives no pay for any calls or on-call time as a county commission chairman because he cannot fill that position, and there's 1 vacancy.
Do you know Mr. Bearden's deputies?
I don't know them off the top of my head, no. I think I know 1 or 2, but not specifically.
You can go to the Georgia Coroners Association website.
Okay.
And it lists them.
Okay.
Then you can go to his funeral home website.
Yep.
And it lists the same ones.
They're probably his family, yeah.
Yeah.
His son.
His
yeah.
son and 3 other funeral home employees.
And the county pays them all a base salary, so this legislation
okay.
would not
So
benefit
they get a
them.
salary there.
They have a minimum salary, yes, sir.
Didn't know that one.
Yeah,
Thank
the county does that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Whip?
Yeah, some conversation with my friend across the way. If you look on 104, and it says the 2,080 hours.
Right.
Okay, who determines the 2,080 hours? Coroner determine that?
So that would be the local decision between the county commission and the coroner providing that information.
Okay, in this answer, and I'm trying to find a way through this, I'm hearing local decision, but we're here making a decision at the state level where we're handing everything back. Anytime we run into a snag, it's a local decision. So why wouldn't the rest of this be locally determined and not require us to do this? And I have a coroner in a consolidated government, large, and he is responsible for his office because he's an elected official. So he turns in everything. The city, he goes before the Columbus Consolidated Government every year and puts in budget requests. And what I'm saying here is if he puts in that he is full-time, over 2,080 hours, and his office administers at least 100 death investigations, and I know I'm going to upset corners when I say this, 100 death pronouncements is a lot of times what this are, because the vast majority of deaths are natural deaths. And so if he does all that or she does all that, then they are given the same benefits as a clerk of superior court, judge of probate court, the sheriff, or the tax commissioner. And the sheriff is a constitutional officer. The judge, a probate court judge, is mentioned in the Constitution of the state of Georgia. And the clerk of superior court is a elected full-time position, as is the tax commissioner. And so I'm wondering if we are moving the coroner from what they are into something that, and again, I know I'm going to get beat up over this, that they are not.
Well, I don't see this as that equates to making them a constitutional officer. I just see that these are all folks that are trying to serve their communities, and that service has similar value. And this was negotiated through the past efforts of addressing these concerns from the coroners through ACCG's recommendation.
And I appreciate all that, and I see what you're trying to do, but look at my fellow senator, Senator Watson. I'm the same way. The on-call thing and all this, well, look, we're all on call. We are, and nothing goes up when we get a call, but we better answer the phone. 30 years in law enforcement, as I moved up through the ranks, I got on call more and more and more. As the more rank I gathered, the more on-call I got, and the on-call increased my salary 0.000 because I was on the job, and my job was to respond, and I was being paid a salary. So I'm just concerned about that once we do this, are there going to be other positions that come in? And to Chairman Williams' point, are we going to have coroners coming up demanding that we pay their deputies a salary also, or set a minimum standard for a deputy coroner's salary? And I'm concerned about that, and I'm a little concerned that when we hit a sticking point, it's a local decision, And then on the overall thing, it's a decision that we're being asked to make. That's just my concern.
I think those are fair concerns.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether you saw my button.
Go ahead, Senator. You want to make a question?
Yes. To the author of the bill, both authors, I think the first set of questions that the majority whip clarified it a little bit, but you initially said that every county has a coroner, and I want to direct your attention to DeKalb County and Gwinnett counties, and I think even Fulton. But how does that act? You can have either or both, or how does that impact those particular counties of DeKalb and Gwinnett who do have a medical examiner? And why do they have a medical examiner and not a coroner?
I'm assuming it's because of their population. Yeah, those are much larger communities. But this is specifically for coroners. And yes, when the question was asked, I said yes, and then Chairman Wade mentioned it was like 155 counties that had coroners. Mm-hmm.
Is there a situation where they would have both, or?
I'm not aware of any counties that have both. It's either coroners or the medical examiner, and mostly, again, those larger communities are the ones that have medical examiners.
So this bill would not apply to at least 4 counties. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct, because they have medical examiners.
Including but not limited to DeKalb and Gwinnett.
Right.
Thank you.
Senator Mallow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to share, the question was asked about for counties outside of the metro area that don't have medical examiners, how many cases do their coroners handle? And in Chatham County, our coroner has handled last year 1,200, year before that 1,400 cases, which we have had more cases than Bibb County or Richmond County, but our coroner is compensated much lower than those other 2 counties. And if you're right, it could be done by local act. And I would just share with the committee that if we were to do that by local act, then everybody else would then say, oh, we too want an increase in compensation by local act, which is a choice our delegation has made to not open that can of worms, because then it would be everybody would want one. And so this would take that off the table for us, I would just say.
Any other comments, questions? We've got 2 folks signed up to speak. And we will start with Todd Edwards, ACCG.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Todd Edwards with the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. ACCG does oppose the bill in its current form. Y'all have had a lot of good questions, a lot of discussion. The main point being is we have nothing against coroners, feel that probably some of them do deserve higher pay, increased pay. Deputies, you want to make sure they do a fine job, keep doing so. We attract top talent. But that can already be done through one of 2 methods. One is if you look in the act on the pay scale, what's crossed out on lines 53 through 55, that's current law, obviously. So all the counties with populations above that weren't impacted by this minimal statewide salary. So my point being is that most all are governed by local act. So local act can and often does increase, work between you, the legislators, local officials, coroner, increase the salaries. And in fact, were there salaries for those not previously covered, by this bill? Second, in addition to local act, your county commissioners can provide local supplement. They could just do it monthly, they could do it per death case, they could provide vehicles, whatever else. They work with their the coroner. We do feel that should be decided at the local level. Couple of provisions that we noted in this bill. We have worked, it's been a long time, with Representative Wade, others in the House, worked with the Coroners Association. Feel a lot of this we could support, particularly on lines 32. that 250, what that does is increase the per diem or the per case death investigation fee for coroners from 175 to 250. We'd be in support of that. The second provision in there about, and they've got a lot of discussion, paying coroners $100 per day. And it was mentioned that this is not only could it be for them not working, but this doesn't even say that they're on call and not working. So there's no on call or any provision. You're just going to pay them $100 a day. Now, it does say at the end, provided, I believe the language is sufficient funds have been budgeted. Well, that's already the case. I mean, it's discretionary. If this is meant to be discretionary, then there's absolutely no reason to have that in the bill. We would, should the bill move forward, we would ask them to leave the amendments in front of you just to take that part out about the deputy coroners. There's a couple of other provisions on lines 39 leading into 40. This deals with deputy coroners' salaries, and it says you can't reduce them for the remainder of the term of the coroner. That's unlike anything else we have in statute. Even then, they're not constitutional officers, but even then, counties have the ability to reduce local supplements at the end of each 4-year term. This is a special class. This says for the end of the entire term of the coroner for how many ever elections that took place. I'll sum it up very quickly, Mr. Chairman. There are a couple of other provisions which are minor. I think that comes through at the end as well. The population salary, the chart there, we'd be okay with that provision. I mean, a lot of counties won't be, and you may hear from their smaller counties still. Should this bill pass, we try to work in good faith, negotiate, and compromise. And we did work with the Coroners Association leading on over to lines 104 through 109. And there was long discussions on what is a full-time coroner. How many death investigations does a coroner do per year? What constitutes full-time? That's a long discussion, and that answer just depends on the questions you asked earlier. Smaller counties, the coroner may do a majority of them. Some of them, their deputies may do a majority of the cases. Depends on how many deputies, and they're not always on call, all of them all the time. One of them is the other. That's why you have the deputy. But that was a compromise we reached to justify full-time benefits should this legislation go through. So we're currently opposed. If it should pass, we appreciate and would probably could go neutral on the legislation should those amendments in front of you be adopted.
So if the two amendments were adopted, you wouldn't be in favor, you'd be neutral?
And I just wanted to make sure that, may I approach someone?
Absolutely. That's correct. That's correct, Senator.
ACCG would be neutral of the adoption of said amendments.
Okay. Senator Mallow?
Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, I would support a do-pass motion, and I would support the amendments and move for the amendments. And I would just offer to my colleagues that on the $100 for each day, the per diem would be that the deputy coroner would have to be on call. To clarify that and put that language in on line 33 that the deputy coroner would receive $100 for each day the deputy coroner is on call and does not work a case.
Okay, thank you.
I can accept that.
What's that? Senator Sessler?
Thank you. Also, if we're going to contemplate an amendment on the bill, the 20-80 hours, that's 52 hours a week, 40 hours full-time. That doesn't contemplate holidays, doesn't contemplate days off. I would just say to the committee, I would offer as a friendly amendment taking 20-80 down to 1,800. When you think about that, if you've got a 3 weeks vacation and holidays, you've got training days that are not tied to your coroner job, I just want to make sure that a full-time coroner, 1,800 kind of gets you across the line. So I would offer that as a friendly amendment. So just at the appropriate time.
Senator Ginn.
Mr. Chairman, I want to, my esteemed colleague from the second, I do want to make sure that when you look at what was passed out as an amendment, the first section is talking about replacing lines 31 through 36. So I think I have a question, because that would take out the $100 per day in there, and it would basically be paying them for when they're actually performing that work. So I want to make sure we're on the same page, that understanding of what we're doing with the proposed sheet of amendments, the 3 amendments that are in here, and that you're good with that, because I like the amendments. I think it makes sense, and I think it's something that if we can get this bill moving forward, I want to help you, Representative Cindy, to get your bill moving, and I think it's something that protects our coroners and the great work that they do, and that's where, we've been talking about this for 3 years now,
Yes.
and I think it's something, if I got ACCG neutral, that's almost like their support, but they're just not saying so.
Yes.
So at the proper time, Mr. Chairman, I would second the Senator Mallow's.
Yeah, we've got another. We've got one more speaker. Let's see, Todd Edwards. You wait. Okay, thank you. Oh, go ahead, Senator.
Mr. Chair, before you go, just a quick question as relates to the amendment here, so we can come to a good, I think, happy medium. Line 5 on the amendment says, however, provided, however, that the county shall not owe such fee to a deputy coroner receiving an annual salary established through local legislation. Has ACCG given any thought to the opportunity for the on-call coroner to receive any type of per diem if the coroner is on vacation in the hospital, had a heart attack or anything like that, if they had to be physically in the building and on call? Because I do understand, working in the General Assembly as a senator, if you tell your employer you got to be on call or you have to be at the office, you can't do their job. So, for example, my employer, I take vacation days for every day that I'm in the General Assembly. How would we amend that? I just want to get a little clarity on that, just to make sure I know.
So just read the line here. However, that the county shall not owe such fee to a deputy coroner receiving an annual salary established through local legislation. As with any of this, if the local legislation establishes something, or either that would be higher, or the collections of the fee where the deputy coroner would get to select. And if I'm mistaken, it's not intentional, but I believe that to be the case, would get the higher of the two. So, plus the the local government or the governing authority would have the option to increase that, and that's when I came in with our original arguments.
Okay.
This can be done.
So ACCG,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
ACCG
You ready?
acceptable to this part?
Before we get to that, any other comments, questions from anyone else?
No.
Okay, seeing none. I know this has been the third year. This is the first year I've had to deal with this issue. I had a couple of members that, some of their locals were opposed, and they sent the amendments waiting to hear back. I'm actually one of them. With Barrow County, they were opposed to this, but we sent them the amendments waiting to hear back on that. So this is going to be a hearing only today. It's my understanding, hopefully tomorrow, Friday, definitely by Friday, we could have another hearing. So I just want to hear back from our locals. I've got, like I said, 2 other members that are wanting to do the same, and I just want to make sure we get this right. And I appreciate your work. I know you've been working on this for a number of years, and I get the basis of it. It's just we want to make sure we get this one correct. So
I understand.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you all for the testimony, and we'll get us another date on the books. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We're adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to present. Thank you, committee members, for listening.
Thank you.